Obviously, of course, as well, that you kind of travel along in your journey with Carlos Perez Schumann, your consultant. Are you still in contact with him?
Yeah. But actually, there's something about when one does research in a place. One develops very close links to people, and I've been back several times, but my work also takes me now to many different places in the Peruvian Amazon, because I've been working for a Swiss organization over the last 20 years, and I try not to privilege the people that I did field work with. So even though I'm on good terms with the people in the Pichis Valley, I'm also happy just to let them get on with their lives and not to intervene,
Yeah.
I try to act at the level where, the different indigenous organizations ask me to. For the moment, I think that the people in the Pichis Valley, they were happy that I came, and they were happy to see me go, and they've been happy to do their own thing. They're a pretty independent bunch of people, and they don't want to be defined by the anthropologists that come and go. And I think they're right to kind of keep us on our toes and so on. So I'm quite happy not to be going back to the Pichis Valley more than once every decade or so.
Yeah, so they still remain their level of independence in that sense, and don't get too much influence from the rest of the world. Would you say that's the case?
Well, I wouldn't say that, because actually the rest of the world has been a very strong influence on all of these cultures in recent years, and in particularly on the young generation, and what is attractive to them is all the technologies and the radios and the CD players and the beer and the alcohol and the TV sets and the DVDs. I mean, the list. And that's way more interesting than, for example, what an anthropologist writes, or, because that's mainly what anthropologists do, is they write. So I think that the young, as I did my field work 25 years ago, I think there's lots of young Ayaschanica people who've never heard of me and couldn't care less, and I think that's just fine. But meanwhile, the technological industrial world is arriving in their world, and it's not an easy one to deal with.
That's right. In terms of your visionary journeys, the experiences you were having down there, and things, how you put it together in the Cosmic Serpent, your book, was that anything that you continued to do in terms of your education at Stanford, or was this something you did on your own at the side of your education, Jeremy?
Very much. And you see, back in those days, I mean, I don't know if you remember the 1980s, but hallucinogens were out, and LSD was illegal, and nobody talked about them. Even artists didn't talk about them in the 1980s. But certainly not academics, certainly not anthropologists. And as I say, I was doing research trying to show that these Indians use their resources rationally, and I wrote a whole dissertation trying to demonstrate that. I soft-pedaled the hallucinogens entirely. The dissertation was published in 1989. And then I started working as an activist for an NGO here in Switzerland to promote projects for the titling of indigenous territories in the Amazon. And once again, I would do that by holding rational discourses. And it was only after 4 or 5 years of this that I realized, as I spoke publicly, raising funds to help demarcate indigenous territories, that there was something that I was not saying every time I spoke, which is that, okay, these people may use the rainforest rationally, that is, they can make it produce without destroying it, but what they say about their knowledge of the rainforest is that at the heart of their knowledge there is this irrational sphere. They say that they get knowledge about plants and animals from their visions induced by plants like ayahuasca and tobacco. So I knew that by only presenting the rational aspect of indigenous knowledge, that there was something important that I was leaving out, and that was something that was taboo for Western knowledge. And I felt, well, this is interesting, and I'm an independent researcher at this point. I've got my doctorate from Stanford. I'm no longer affiliated. It's like having a driver's license, you know. Mm-hmm. I work for a small Swiss NGO that's independent, and and that bases itself on the ethics of Albert Schweitzer, which is simply respect for life and other cultures. Well, I thought, if even I can't touch this subject, who can? So I felt like it was almost my duty as a small, open-minded, independent researcher to pick up this taboo subject, because it was also a question of just, I thought, basic human rights, which is that we use the botanical knowledge of these indigenous Amazonian peoples, and our pharmaceutical industries are quite happy, thank you very much, to take their plants and extract active molecules. But we can't even sit down at a table and have a polite conversation with them about where their knowledge comes from, because if they say it comes from the hallucinations of our shamans, we can't take them seriously. Okay, so there's a problem here, I felt. And so simply out of, I would say, intercultural politeness and also basic human rights, I thought it would be appropriate for a fellow like me to roll up his sleeves and look at this mystery. There's just one question. What does it mean when indigenous Amazonian people say they get verifiable information about plants and plant properties from the visions that their shamans get from consuming psychoactive plants?
I definitely want to, get more into that, obviously, here as we carry on. But just as a side note, and see if you have any comment on this, is obviously the aspect that we here in the Western world, obviously, we use things that come from this as well. You tell a story in the book about the origins of modern anesthetics, for instance, and certain properties there, which is amazing itself. But also just a comment on the fact that truly creative people, also in the Western world, seems to have been primarily driven by visions and other things as well. I mean, we could even go back to the news from 2004 when it was discovered that Francis Crick, the Nobel Prize-winning father, as he's called, of modern genetics, was under the influence of LSD when he first deduced the double helix structure. So it's there even in our Western culture and kind of hiding underneath the surface, right?
Well, actually, you can go much further back than that, and there's a book written in 1950 called The Art of Scientific Investigation. This book goes over all the major discoveries of science and technology in the 200 years prior to 1950 to show that most, if not all, of the fundamental discoveries were made by people not when they were scratching their heads in front of the blackboard, but when they were walking across the park, taking a bath, eureka, shaving, stepping onto a bus, just moments when your consciousness is wandering or defocalizing. Kekule saw the structure of the benzene ring as he dozed to sleep in front of a fire. And it just goes on with Einstein and the theory of relativity, but it's also true into the late 20th century and Carey Mullis and the polymerase chain reaction and so on. Some people have used drugs, other people didn't even need them.
Computers, Steve Jobs, Wozniak and other people, same thing there.
Long list. Unfortunately, though, if all one had to do was to take some drugs to invent new things, then the world would just be packed filled with new things. In other words, drugs are not sufficient, clearly.
And
I'm just saying, I'm just trying to look at it in a coherent fashion, because there's an awful lot of people taking an awful lot of drugs.
Yeah.
But there are not an awful lot of new discoveries. But it is true that many discoveries come in these states of consciousness. So,
exactly.
It's complicated.
It is complicated, and I would agree with you. It's not just a matter of popping something and expect great things to happen. It's something about the consciousness within as well, obviously, that is having the experience of the drug and the visual experience there. But that kind of takes us into the level of the origins of knowledge. And basically, I guess I want to ask you what you think that this comes from. If we talk about this in terms of creativity or inspiration or this kind of, if you will, then scientific knowledge that seems to exist within these so-called, primitive cultures and things like that. What does that come from? Do we just tap into that, do you think?
Yeah, I think that the answer to that question is necessarily theological and therefore tricky. and I myself would prefer to be an agnostic.